Skylar, I think, oh great, so this session is being recorded. Thank you, Skylar, for hitting that button. Hi everybody, my name is Erica and I've got our junior fellow Skylar here on the line with me today for this presentation. And this represents something I'm pretty excited about because it's sort of the culmination of a lot of what we've learned about how to tell good stories about engineering, specifically tapping into how to tell your own story about how you ended up in engineering and the difference that can make in the future. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of an introduction, then I'm going to turn it over to Skylar to present some of the tangible steps that you can go through to tell your story based on what we've learned in the course of our travels in the last 5 or 6 years with the venture. And then we're going to have some next steps and invitations for you, which we hope that you'll be excited about as well. So let's go to the next slide. Awesome. Thank you, Skylar. So as you might know, Engineers of Tomorrow we're a venture, we're a part of EWB Canada, and we think that we can transform the future of the engineering profession by talking about it differently today. And essentially this comes down to what young people think about engineering, what they understand and know about engineering, and how we can influence that by the way that we speak about engineering. And also, of course, that includes everyone who influences young people, including parents, teachers, guidance counselors, big sisters, brothers, cousins, nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles, everybody who forms these young people's understanding of the world and what their place might be in it. So we aim to shape the general public's perception of engineering and shape its future. So if you don't already know about us, you can check us out, eot.ewb.ca. And as I said, the material that we're presenting to you here today is sort of a taste of something that we are experimenting with, and we're hoping to sort of start a groundswell of people telling their own story about how they ended up in engineering and really shedding some light and some inspiration for these young people as we go. So on the next slide, you will see our truly awesome team. I definitely feel lucky to work with such a great group of people. So there I am, top left. So I'm the venture lead, founded at EOT back in about 2013. Becky is my operations manager who does a great job of taking care of the day-to-day responsibilities of the venture. We have lots of them as we do National Engineering Month in Ontario, and we also take care of the Engineer in Residence program. So our summer intern, Vanessa, she's back for her 2nd year with the team, has been doing an awesome job on the Engineer in Residence program, along with Skylar, our dedicated EOT junior fellow, who has worked on the Engineer in Residence program along with the presentation that you're about to see here today. So give a shout out to our advisors as well, Sal, who used to be our portfolio manager, who still makes time out of his busy schedule as a consulting engineer to give us advice and encouragement and strategy input. Alan was our venture strategist for many years on a full-time basis and now still makes time to chat with us about projects, as well as Mark, who is runs the Engineering Change Lab, which you might have heard of, as part of the Evolving Engineering cohort of EWB. We compare notes a lot with him. And once people work for EOT, they kind of don't go away. We love keeping in touch with our alumni. Super impressive group of young people, some of them engineering students, some of them not engineering students, all of them really invested in the change that we want to see. So shouts out to Jonathan and Shivangana and Jonathan, one of whom is on the call tonight. Yay! Really happy to stay in touch with you and to leverage and learn from your experience of EOT and how that's been along the way. That's really valuable to us. So I'm going to turn it over to Skylar, who is going to tell her story of how she came to be an engineering student. Go for it, Skylar.
Okay, thank you, Erica. So my name is Skylar, and I'm in my 3rd year of chemical engineering at the University of New Brunswick. But it wasn't straightforward that this is what I wanted to do from childhood. My early perceptions of engineering were kind of skewed because you can see a photo of my father there, and he's a great guy, and he's a civil engineer. So it was really cool. I knew about engineering when a lot of kids didn't. didn't. Unfortunately, though, he perpetuated a lot of the engineering stereotypes, and because of that, I'd ask him as a kid, like, "What do you do, Dad? Like, what do you do every day?" And he would tell me, "Oh, I stand in a field with a robot, or I plot boundary lines on properties." And like, I'm sure that's interesting to some people, but that's all he told me about it. And to me, that's like, that's what an engineer does. That sounds really boring. So I didn't have an interest in engineering, and I never really considered it as a career option. As a child, I did a lot of soccer, dance, and just interested in a lot of different sciencey things too. I used to always make little potions in my room using glue, lotion, food coloring, and whatever kind of other substances I can find in my house. So that was one of the telltale signs, like, hey, maybe a science or a STEM career would be good for me. I didn't pick up on it at the time, but my parents sure did. But going through high school, I still, because of these stereotypes in engineering, I never considered engineering to be an option for me. I remember once going to a science fair, and there were these two professors doing a chemistry demonstration where they did all these really cool experiments. And I was absolutely in love with chemistry. I left that science fair that day and told my parents, I'm going to be a chemist when I grow up. But I didn't really know what that was either. And they told me, you're not just going to blow things up all day. Like, that's not what it is. Um, and yeah, not knowing really what chemistry was. I enjoyed it in high school, but my love for dance and soccer and sports led me to go into kinesiology at university my first year. Now, I figured out this wasn't for me about 2 weeks into my anatomy course when I absolutely hated every single thing we did, and I realized it was the basis for my entire degree. So I was talking to some of my floor mates who are female engineering students, and they told me about all of the possibilities and all the career options. They told me about job security, not only how that would be nice, but also how broad and how all the fields are so great and how it's a great platform, like a great basis to have no matter what you do afterwards. So the following year, I transferred to the University of New Brunswick and I started majoring in chemical engineering. Now, at this time, I still had the mindset that I wouldn't really be able to make an impact on the world. My job would be repetitive and mundane and just a very stereotypical job. And I just kind of accepted, like, I'm not special. I'm not going to make a change in the world, as sad as that is. But the more I learned about engineering and different clubs on campus, such as Engineers Without Borders is one of them, I discovered that engineering is so much more than just the courses we are taught in school. There's places for engineering and everything from international development to like the stereotypical engineering jobs like nuclear power plants, and there's just so much of an impact it can have on the world. And I really realized how much engineering helps people, even though you don't see it directly like a doctor patient, like it's not immediate, but it helps so many people and it's changing the world. And from knowing that, I realized that I'm definitely in the right degree and I'm not just going to have a repetitive and mundane job, that just having this degree will open up so many doors for me in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Skylar. So I will chime in with my story. Starting from the very, very beginning, top right, there I am as a baby, exploding my way into the world, ready to do something or other. Obviously, when we're kids, you start to get little hints of your personality, and I was always very determined, and I had a lot of different interests. I was very into music and into sports, as Skylar was as well. And I think because I was so very verbal and I learned to read really early, I think maybe my family assumed that I was going to be a writer or a journalist or some kind of communicator as a profession. But then these little things started to show up as I grew and matured. And when I was 7, my mom tells me all about how I loved to go outside. And we lived in the country, and I would get into my rubber boots after a rainfall, and I would drag my heel through the mud and make all of these complicated trenches and connect the puddles, and this was just the most fun thing ever for me to do. And what I sort of realized after the fact is that I really like to make a tangible impact. And I love that element of rolling up my sleeves and doing a job and feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. And, long story short, I had a career in manufacturing engineering and then moved on to work in the mining industry, always very physical impact to what I was doing. And I found that extremely satisfying and rewarding. It wasn't going to be, a type of career where I was just thinking about ideas or just in a lab doing experiments on sort of a theoretical level. Not that there's anything wrong with doing those jobs, but what really got me going was feeling like I was actually doing something physically, tangibly present in the world. So fast forward a little bit to age 10, and it was my turn to put away the dishes, and I really didn't want to do that. So what did I do? I guess instead I drew up a sketch of an invention that would put away the dishes for me. And it was this very sort of elaborate set of conveyor belts with a robot to load on the dishes at the beginning, and I had the divisions between the dishes all figured out, and I knew that the dishes couldn't break, so I needed to have some kind of shock absorbing, and it all needed to be held up across the length of the kitchen. And of course my parents were maybe rolling their eyes a little bit and saying, wow, why doesn't she just put away the dishes? Why is she so lazy, kind of thing. I prefer to think of it as innovative and inventive, and I was already, given my age, I was already starting to think of the components of the process and what I would need to put in place in order to accomplish my goal. So maybe that was kind of an early warning sign of being an engineer as well, even though I'd never built the thing. I wasn't one of those tinkering kids who loved to take apart engines at an early age. That wasn't me, but the concept was there, and I loved the idea of being able to make stuff and design gadgets to do things for me and to find a better way to do things at any given time. So I did end up definitely using that type of a skill as a continuous improvement engineer when I was working, as I said, in both automotive manufacturing and later on in mining. When I was 12, the Man in the Mirror video dropped from Michael Jackson, and I don't know how old you were or where you were when that happened, but no doubt you, even when I tell this story to kids today, even 9 and 10-year-olds, they know exactly who Michael Jackson is, and they know about this video. And they can recite the same line that that really resonated with me at that young age of, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. And it, depicted signs of war, signs of poverty, signs of struggle in the video, and just really stuck with my heart at that point. And I thought, I want to be a part of making the world a better place. I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So whatever I'm doing is going to have a positive human impact. That was very, very important to me. And then age 15, saw the periodic table for the first time in my grade, I guess that would have been grade 11 chemistry class, and I just fell in love with it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I love the idea that this, little table is a shorthand for every substance, every bit of matter that we know about in the universe. And I thought, wow, this is the key to everything. We just need to take the right combination of these ingredients, and we can solve all kinds of problems. And that was, maybe a little bit idealistic. Obviously, having moved on into the real world, I noticed it's not just about technology. It's also about understanding people, understanding systems, understanding contradictions and complexity and all kinds of contexts that maybe we don't get taught in engineering school. But anyway, I just really felt empowered by the idea that we could take these raw ingredients and make something out of them. So I didn't understand these things at the time, and I think maybe even today, some people who work in engineering or who think about engineering may not see that someone who is idealistic and creative and loves making a tangible impact and is fascinated by this idea of having sort of this empowered attitude toward the world and making change and designing the world that is around us. People might not think of those as sort of the dominant characteristics of engineering. Skylar was talking a little bit about the stereotypes of how these jobs are mundane, and maybe there's also a piece about engineers being socially awkward or maybe kind of arrogant. All of these things we know are not true. They're not necessarily true of any individual in any job, let alone engineering. We're all such beautifully unique creatures who bring our own story to the table. And we think that with just a little bit of coaching, we can do what Skylar and I just did and kind of peel back the curtain on who we are as human beings and then how that relates to engineering. And it's, I think, a really cool way to sort of shine a light on aspects of engineering that we might not have thought of or known about before because of that lack of information and those stereotypes that do prevail.
So
go for it, Skylar.
Awesome. So the goal of engineering storytelling, it's not necessarily to recruit young people to engineering. It's more so just to let them know that this is an option for them. If you ask a lot of young kids, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? They'll almost never say engineer. Or if you ask them, what does an engineer do? Most of them either won't know or will give a very stereotypical answer. And so we're not necessarily trying to recruit every single kid into engineering, but just having all of them have a few stories in their mind of a diverse group of individuals in engineering where they can see how it's an option growing up, or at least consider it as an option when they get older. And just the storytelling in general just gives human connection and context. It puts a face to the profession and gives them a role model. It helps challenge and break these stereotypes by showing these diverse group of stories so that like anyone can be an engineer, and it just removes some of the intimidation factor around engineering. Like some of the stereotypes are that it's really hard or it's only for boys, and seeing people tell their stories who clearly aren't these crazy complex human beings, or we're complex human beings, but it's it's relatable to them, and they realize, oh, that person's kind of like me when I was younger, maybe I can be an engineer too. So the benefits of telling your engineering story are for both others and yourself. Others is the obvious one because you're telling the story, and it's a great way to send a message where a lot more is information is retained than just a presentation style uh, uh, event or just statistics, and people are able to emotionally connect with what you're saying. But it's as much as it is for others, it's also for yourself, because to be an effective storyteller you have to do a lot of self-reflection, and you'll quite often learn new things about yourself and even possibly your career, and you'll have this new perspective which is very valuable and fun. So you can use your engineering storytelling tools at many places, from anything from formal outreach events to your own social network of family and friends. You can do it youth volunteer work. It doesn't necessarily even need to be an engineering story, just storytelling in general is very useful. And also you can practice with your fellow engineering students or coworkers. So here are some tips on how to actually build your engineering story. Just different prompts that you can give that will help you carry through from the beginning to end. So one of the obvious ones, my name is blank and I am something you're proud of. So I could say, my name is Skylar and I'm an innovator, or I'm an artist, or something along those lines. Just giving something that you can own. It's a very powerful way to start a speech, and quite often people will be able to relate to what you're saying, being like, oh, I see myself as this too. Another thing to do is really think about your past. So use prompts like, ever since I was little, I loved this. One of my favorite memories is, say, soccer practice or dance practice, or in high school, I did a science fair kind of thing. And this not only gets them to relate to you, because usually they're younger audiences, so going through kind of experiencing that kind of stuff at the time, so putting a face to the profession and realizing you're kind of like them, but also for you thinking about your past, it kind of gets you to connect the dots of how did I become an engineer, and think about that. There's probably a lot more that you realize it probably wasn't just a decision in high school. I like math and science. For a lot of people, that's a lot of the decision, but there's probably telltale signs throughout your entire life where you realize, oh, this is something very engineering related. And I didn't realize I was doing that when I was 10 years old, like Erica's mud trenches or my chemistry potions. So another way to relate to them is unpack your reasons for engineering. Tell them your thought process behind the decision for going into it, and maybe some misconceptions you had going into it and what you figured out afterwards, or maybe you really enjoyed something about engineering that you want to let them know about that they maybe not didn't think about initially. That's a great way to relate to them too. You can share your fears and challenges, because if these people are, say, in high school and deciding what to do in university, or if they're going to university, they probably have a lot of the same fears as you did, such as the stereotypes in their heart. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be mostly for boys. It's not going to be fun. I'm not going to have a life. If you do this, just make sure you turn it into something positive in the end. Be honest, but also don't try and scare them away from it, obviously. But yeah, just saying, I realized engineering was going to be hard, but everyone's in the same boat. The professors are very supportive, and if you put in hard work, you probably will get through it. So just relate to them on that level, because they probably likely have the same fears and challenges that you did when you were their age. And then talk about the change you'd like to see. Quite often, the world we like to see when we're doing big picture thinking, a lot of people think of similar things. Like, I would like to see a world without poverty and without inequality and things like that. I want to see a world where everyone's equal. And saying I dream about these things and then finding ways that engineering can relate to them, like how engineering can help the world, how engineering can help alleviate poverty, create opportunity, all of these things. It makes you connect engineering and something that's stereotyped as maybe repetitive and mundane. It really challenges that, and it opens a world of thought, and it makes you realize, like, oh, I can make the same kind of difference as, like, I can make a huge difference. Like, a doctor saves a patient's life. I might not see a direct change, but I can really change the world too. And then also, this is more specific to, say, high school students going into the university, like a specific university. But if you go there, you can always say, like, what you really love about the university and talk about the support systems that are in place, like saying this university will support you. They have this really cool program that will help you out, and they care about you. Or if you're struggling, they have this writing center or something along those lines, just to show that you're definitely not alone and just going to be thrown into this crazy new world that is engineering, or they might think it's a crazy new world at the time. It's not too different, actually. And the last thing is offer advice. You could say, my advice to you is to study really hard, or to have a work life balance, or anything from like valuable tips to, oh, challenge these misconceptions you have an open mind going into it. Just know that you belong from the get go, because you do, and things like that. It doesn't necessarily need to be professional advice from someone who's been in the industry a long time. It can be students, just what they've learned in their first few years of university, and the most that they've got out of it, like how much, like think about how much you've changed from the start of your degree to where you are now, and think about what's changed for you and what major thoughts have changed for you, and maybe offer those thoughts to them. So, for some tips for storytelling, like I said, really look into your past. You don't always know what you're looking for until you find it, which is kind of the connect the dots thing I was saying. Really think about how you became an engineer from childhood. The more I think about it, the more I realize there's so much that I'm honestly sitting here like I can't believe it wasn't obvious that I should have been an engineer from like by the time I was 10 years old. But at the time I didn't notice those things. But there's so much that you can discover as you're thinking back to this more and more. You'll probably uncover more and more telltale signs that, oh, engineering is probably a good profession for you. Um, Another tip is to lead with your human story, not your credentials. The point of storytelling is to make you relatable and accessible and help break down stereotypes surrounding engineering, make you a role model and put the face to the profession. So it's not necessarily to make you look impressive. That's not the point of this. And another tip is to know your audience. It really helps if you know their age range. So, say they're in middle school, maybe talk about things you did in middle school, like play soccer and dance, things that they can definitely relate to because they're probably going through a lot of the same things. Or, oh, I remember this class was really hard. Or, I found this class really boring, or homework, or anything they can really relate to show you were like them at one point, and it really just reiterates the fact that anyone can be an engineer. Also, try and give examples and use language that they can relate to. So, some do's and don'ts of storytelling. Do tell your story with enthusiasm and emotion. Rehearse your story many times before telling it. Be descriptive and give examples, and keep it short and sweet. I've seen recommendations for 3 to 5 minutes. I've seen a few go over, but remember you're trying to really send a message home with them. So if you make it too long and lose their attention span, that might not be the message might not hit them as hard as you want it to. Uh, Definitely don't tell your story as if it's just a presentation. You definitely need that emotion to connect with them. And don't tell details or plot lines that won't progress the story at all. So if you're being descriptive and saying examples like I recommend you do, just make sure that they'll relate back to the story in some way that will make sense for where it's going. Another thing, don't just say, my name is Skylar and I'm a chemical engineer, because most people don't know what that is and it's not really going to resonate with them. Do say, I use chemistry, physics, math, and biology to convert raw materials and chemicals into useful products like medications, food, drink, paper, clothes, so much more. Helps generate electricity. There's so many things that you can talk about under your job position that uh, isn't just the title of your job position, because they're not going to know what chemical engineering is. But they can understand, oh, you're going to take this raw material and turn it into something that they use every day. That is something they can understand. Or computer engineer, they're not going to understand the job title, but they're probably going to understand the specifics of it. And so this really just falls under use language that they would understand so they can relate to it and it'll resonate with them. So some further resources. There's a link to Telling Your Story webinar, which was done by Erin Rogers for the National Engineering Month. And that kind of goes into the tangible actions of storytelling more generally. There's also the Moth Radio Hour and some educational resources there. You can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter. And we also have an Engineers of Tomorrow YouTube channel coming soon. So stay tuned for that. And then thank you for attending. I'll be sending everyone here a feedback survey.
That's awesome, Skylar. Sorry, before you wrap up, remember we talked we were going to do the interactive part.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay, so don't wrap up yet. Don't go, everybody. Skylar, if you wouldn't mind, just go backwards, please, to the first prompt, because what we're going to do now, perfect, right there. Yep, identify yourself. So what we're going to do here is ask for the kind indulgence of our folks on the line and asking you to put yourself out there a little bit and try applying these with us real time. So I think the way we're going to do this is I'm going to kind of fill in the blanks, follow these prompts for myself, and for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to say that I'm speaking to university students, because I know a couple of you here, Skylar and Jonathan, are university students, and I can just speak to you. I don't even have to pretend I'm speaking to you. So the way I'd like to do this is I will give my response, and I would encourage you, just don't overthink it too much. You have the option either to unmute yourself and say something live on the line, or you can put your answer in the chat box and we can read it out for you. So this is going to go pretty quickly, I think. So again, like I said, don't overthink it. As Skylar mentioned, it's awesome if you can rehearse, but it's even better if you can just jump in and start to build your first messy draft of your engineering story, because it's going to be something that you can work on and iterate on over and over again. And it's okay if you don't know all the answers right now. Your gut guess and your first response is probably a pretty good place to start. Okay, so are you all up for that? Is that cool? I think this is just going to take maybe 10, 15 minutes to run through these different prompts. Okay, so I would say, my name is Erica, and I am a change agent. That is how I'm going to use that. All right, Jonathan's in. Awesome. So would anyone else like to start that identifier process? Skylar, I thought I heard you say something earlier that sounded really cool. Do you want to talk about
Yeah, what word did I use exactly? I think I said, my name is Skylar and I'm an innovator.
Woohoo, awesome. Okay, who else?
All right, I can go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go, Jonathan.
Awesome. So my name's Jonathan, and I'd say I'm a dreamer.
Ooh, love it. Awesome, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, cool. All right, fantastic. Think about your past. So ever since I was little, I guess I could pick up on, I have been fascinated by the ability to change the world around me and the ability to do things differently and tangibly. One of my favorite memories related to that was helping my grandfather lay bricks in what is now the chimney of my parents' house. So they were building an addition, and there's a photo of me, I think I was maybe 9 years old, helping haul some cement around. So again, maybe an early warning sign, I don't know. And the fact that I had, just a really healthy respect for a lot of the blue collar hands-on industries. And in high school, what did I do? Gosh, I was in band. I was on the yearbook. What else did I do? Lots of different extracurriculars, as many as possible, I think. So yeah, if anyone would like to share, feel free to share all 3 prompts, or just one of the 3 or 2 of the 3, whatever is jumping to mind for you. Skylar, do you want to take a stab?
Sure. So ever since I was little, I have always loved and been fascinated by mixing, specifically, and chemical reactions.
The mad scientist in her bedroom. I love it.
I know. Even making cookies, like I would put the mixer on so slowly so I could see everything mixed together. I loved it. I don't know why I loved it so much, but I did. So one of my favorite memories related to this was the science fair I went to, where they did the experiments and they showed all these cool explosions. They'd fill balloons with nitrogen or different gases and then light them on fire and see the explosion, which is so cool. And also making potions in my bedroom. In high school, I did a lot of sports, so soccer, dance, field hockey, sailing, rock climbing, things like that.
I played field hockey too. Cool. Right on. How about you, Jonathan?
All right. So I'll go with the prompts. Ever since I was little, I have been fascinated. I was more fascinated when I was little, but by trains in general. I was a big fan of trains. First I wanted to be a bus driver, then I wanted to be a train driver. And as I understand now, this position is called a train engineer. So I was close to engineering at that moment, and I was especially fascinated by when I went to the train station and looked at all the different railroads going parallel and all the different junctions, and I loved seeing the organization of everything. And one of my favorite memories related to that was when I had my first miniature train set at home. So I got it was always my dream at that moment to have a room dedicated to having small trains go around, and I loved especially the planning phase, because to have a proper layout, you have to first design an actual layout, then build some scenery, and then afterwards place your tracks and run your train around the tracks. So that was I
Very
have
cool. So it was
great
like the
memories from
planning
that.
and then the execution for you. That
Yeah,
was
yeah, exactly. And
transporting things
planning,
through space. Nice. Okay, great.
yeah, and the most also the engineering related side of planning is that since I was a kid, I had very limited resources, so I actually like never bought stuff again after this first gift. So everything I built was from either cardboard or stuff like that. So learn to build stuff with limited resources. And
Right. That's very
fortunately,
applicable to engineering too, isn't it? That's cool.
yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, actually, I'm surprised. Like, I don't think I've ever told you that before, even that train
Ah,
story.
makes sense, Steve. This is what I mean. The dots connect backwards.
Yeah,
They really
exactly.
starts
And
to make more sense.
unfortunately, that passion kind of went away for high school, so I don't have any more high school memories. I know, like in the past years, I always have a phase when I start looking for miniature trains online and thinking, oh, I can make up a budget for that. And then 2 days later, I'm onto something else.
You got a little distracted from the trains, but you did other things, presumably, in high school. And I think from a storytelling point of view, that's a good thing to show too. Because again, what Skylar mentioned about making yourself accessible and relatable, you know, there may be kids who are in sports and in, you know, band and interculture club and doing all kinds of things that they might not consider really related to engineering because they're not computer club or mathletics or something.
Yeah.
Again, it's that very narrow band of understanding of what engineering really does and how it relates. So yeah, feel free to share something non-train related for that third prompt there.
Ah, in high school. In high school, I wasn't the most sociable man. What what did I do interesting? I guess I started doing more interesting things in CEGEP, where I got involved in various clubs, very unrelated to engineering, like politics clubs and then student associations. And it was really with the belief that I wanted and that I had to do something to help other people go through school, and just yeah, that's what kept me involved, is the will to help. And I find that it's what keeps me in engineering right now. It's the same will, the same belief that I should do something to help others.
Very cool. All right, great. Thanks for sharing, Jonathan. That's awesome. Um, so I chose engineering because, and this is really the brass tacks of it, that a guidance counselor, somebody said to me, you're good at math and science. Why don't you try it? It's hard, but why don't you try it, kind of thing. And I think my personality has always been one that likes to step up to a challenge and likes to prove myself. And so as soon as I heard it was hard, I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's bring it on, kind of thing. And at that point, I was sort of split between engineering and music. Like I probably would have done a music degree if I hadn't done an engineering degree. So it was very one of those definitely crossroads sort of moments. And I think there was a little bit of a pragmatic element coming into it as well, whereas I figured, you know, if I do this, do a music degree and try to make my living as a musician, that's maybe going to be a little more difficult than if I get get an engineering degree and I can always do music on the side, kind of thing. Like there's maybe just a little bit more of a practical element there. So I thought that it was it was going to be a challenge and it was going to be a bit of a pragmatic or a safe option for me. But what I didn't realize at the time, what I would discover later on as I worked in my first few jobs as a manufacturing engineer, was how much I got to use my different skills. So my love for communicating and documenting things and visualizing processes as a whole came into play when I was facilitating improvement teams. And again, with seeing the whole picture, I also learned how to convert the value of the improvement projects we were running into a financial, like looking at the impact to the business, and learning how to talk to a plant manager and sort through all the different problems he was having and prioritize the ones that were going to give us the best cost savings and the best return on investment for the time we were spending to solve them. So I really enjoyed that. I mean, I guess technically that's more like a business set of skills, but the fact that it kind of worked into the engineering work that I was doing, I didn't know that was going to happen, and it was a really good surprise. And to be honest, probably saved me and made me realize, hey, like I can be a good engineer and I can enjoy engineering and bring all of myself to it, even though I wasn't the best engineering student. I was frankly just found my courses pretty tedious and abstract and didn't really get the point of them. They didn't really connect with that place in me that wanted to have a tangible impact and make things better. But I think the teamwork element as well of the work that I was doing as a manufacturing engineer, and I was talking to people on the floor about their ideas, and some of these were, you know, extremely educated, smart people, you know, engineers from India and programmers from Pakistan, and, you know, that were working in these hourly jobs in this factory in Canada because their credentials weren't recognized. But they were sitting there on the line all day, and they had so much time to think up ideas and ways to do things better. And it was my job to listen to them and then try to get those ideas implemented. So I love the democratization of the, you know, of the power that was going on there. I loved like the way that I could sort of be a voice for these people and recognize the contribution and the value that they brought, even though they were sort of working within this larger system that didn't fully embrace them. So I didn't know I was going to get to do that. And as much as, you know, I think some people have this very black and white notion about good jobs and bad jobs, like a good job is one where you get to, I don't know, work with people, and a bad job is one where you have to work with your hands. Or like there's this I find this very polarized thinking amongst university students I talk to sometimes of like, oh, that's a bad job, that's a boring job, and this is a good job. I think so much of it is about the mindset that you bring and the will that you have to see those positive aspects. Because I think I could look at my engineering job on the one hand and say, it's manufacturing, it's automotive, I'm in a factory, I have to wear, you know, I have to wear safety goggles, I have to wear steel-toed boots, like, oh, this is terrible. You know, or I could look at it as like, hey man, I'm, you know, making things better in all these different ways. So there you go.
So I chose engineering mostly because I was really good at, I really liked math and science, and I was pretty good at it. And I also really liked the idea of having a career that had pretty good job and financial security, just because these days everyone is overqualified for their job, and most degrees won't really get you that much farther ahead in what you need to do. And um, that was really a fear of mine, that I'd spend all this money at university, and then even if I liked my courses and everything, it would just put me in debt. So I really like the idea of having a career in financial stability, and then I also liked math and science. So that is mostly why I chose engineering. What I didn't know at the time, that my job wouldn't be repetitive and mundane like I thought it would be, and I really didn't realize how much the work I would be doing could possibly impact the world, change the world, and help people.
Awesome.
Right on.
So,
Thanks, Skylar. How about you, Jonathan?
yes, I chose engineering because I'm a bit shy to say this, but because I hesitated between physics and engineering, and I wanted applied physics. So I figured, oh, engineering, this is going to be more applied physics. And I really rapidly discovered that, well, I actually discovered engineering when going through it, because at first I didn't go in engineering to be an engineer. I just wanted applied physics. And what I discovered was that like engineering is not simply taking some science, some cutting edge research and applying it. It's really having a problem in front of you and having all those pieces of insight that come from either 10 years old research or the research from last year, and trying to find a solution, build some technology, work with people in order to solve a specific, very tangible problem. And like at first, I felt it was a bit of a like doing science and building stuff in a vacuum, but I actually discovered and still discover every day that it's the opposite of that. Like I feel like it's science bridging, making the link between science and the whole world. And so that's like I've been very excited from the moment I discovered that insight. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. And I can't remember what the next prompt is. Aha, fears and challenges. I think I kind of schmucked that one into my last little spiel. I would say if I was speaking to, and I am speaking to engineering university students, I used to worry that I would not be good as an engineer because I wasn't naturally fascinated by the courses I was taking in engineering. I was more of that smart aleck who was putting my hand up and saying, why do we have to learn this? Like, what is this for? Like, how is this helping anyone? I don't get it. Like, why are we doing more equations and more abstract stuff? And I used to worry that like the disdain my professors looked at me with would be the same disdain I would get from my engineering boss, and I would, you know, have to start all over again and, you know, go back to school and get a psychology degree and maybe be a social worker or something. Like, I don't know. That was sort of my fear, was that I had chosen something that I was completely ill-equipped for and not a good fit for, and maybe not capable of. Like maybe some of those ideas about women not being good at STEM or good at engineering or good at math were sort of seeping into my brain, even though I was actually pretty good enough. I realize now that what you do during engineering school really does not reflect accurately what you will do in industry and what you will do in your job, and that it's much more, in my experience, it's much more of a wide open playing field. It's much more of what you bring and what you choose to keep learning. It's not like you come out of engineering school with everything you need to know for the rest of your career. You will continually seek out opportunities to get new skills and to learn new things and to bring and develop new aspects of yourself, whether it's your leadership or project management or learning some finance stuff to go along with your engineering stuff. All of that is just so valuable, and you are going to be a work in progress for the rest of your life, and you have so many more options than you might think. You don't have to check your sort of soul at the door or think that you're just going to turn off your brain and turn on work every day. I don't know anyone who really is satisfied in that way. So that's, I guess, what I would say as far as a fear and a challenge that I've now realized is completely optional. You don't have to be stuck, and you don't have to resign yourself to not being good at something, because it's probably way better than you think.
So I used to worry that engineering would be very hard and I would pretty much fail every single course going into it. I did really well in high school, pretty much had straight A's. So when I went to University of Alberta and did kinesiology, my grades dropped from that like they do for most people, no matter what program you're in. But the fact I hated what I was studying really didn't make it easy for me to motivate myself to study. And because of that, I definitely didn't study as hard as I should have. And my grades were like, they were definitely weren't bad, but I didn't do well. And then this stereotype that engineering was so hard, and there was a stereotype that kinesiology was one of the easier degrees too. And I was like, wow, if I'm getting B's in kinesiology, I'm going to be like barely passing my engineering courses. So I was really scared going into it that I would be kicked out of the program or be put on academic probation or something like that. And I learned from that that is not true at all. I really put my mind to just really studying as much as I could, and I really do enjoy my courses, which makes it a lot easier to study for them. And I am actually doing better than I was in high school, which I don't know was really possible, but it's definitely not as hard as a lot of people make it out to be. If you put your mind to it and get help from profs and TAs and stuff like that, like you'll make it through.
Good for you, Skylar. That's awesome.
All right. So I used to worry that I'd say that engineering, first of all, when I graduate from engineering physics, I'd just be pigeonholed into a very specific job in engineering physics, and that would be the rest of my life. And I've discovered that not only there like engineering jobs in general are very varied, but engineering prepares you for a lot of jobs that are not traditional engineering. Like you can go on to do research, to do project management. Some people do engineering and become like do an MBA and they just start a business. So I now see engineering as a very like while you choose a specialization and you can do very specific studies in a certain discipline, it still equips you with some skills that can be used in really a variety of different jobs. And that's been reassuring, especially since I've always felt like I wanted to, have be in contact with people and have a positive impact in the world. Sometimes I felt like that was in contradiction with my studies in engineering, but I found that no, like I can find an engineering position. I can be like the engineer that I can be an engineer that bridges this gap between the people and the technology. I don't know where I was going, but yeah, I think it was my fear, and now I'm not fearless, but I'm definitely less more more content,
That's great.
more at
You're
ease.
building a metaphorical bridge instead of a physical one.
Exactly. To each their own bridge, I guess.
Yeah, love it. That's great. Talking about the change I want to see, man, there are so many. I think when I think of this strictly as an engineering, just my identity as an engineer, maybe not so much as an engineering change leader, which is obviously where I've spent my last several years. Something I've always been passionate about is worker safety. I just feel that that's a very fundamental sort of right of people to be safe and not to get injured or exposed to toxic chemicals or whatever the hazard might be when they're at work. And this came up a few times when I was working at the factory, and I put my hand up for some volunteer joint health and safety committee positions, and went out of my way after a near miss incident with a robot cell and a colleague of mine. He was almost very badly hurt, but he wasn't, which was great. But everyone was sort of acting very blasé about it, and I wasn't. I was calling a meeting even though it had nothing to do with my product line. I really wanted to make sure we had some answers and that we fixed the problem properly. So I think worker safety is a huge one for me. Also, as I mentioned, sort of helping immigrants assimilate and contribute successfully to Canadian society. And I mean assimilate in a positive way, not in a way that erases their identity or their culture or anything like that, but that really respects them as individuals and what they bring. And I'm also married to an immigrant, so I have experienced how tough the process is from a personal side, watching him go through his learning curve in the 5 years that he's been here since he got here from Argentina. I just think there's so much human potential in people that we maybe don't see because of our biases and because of our ideas about who's smart and what's valuable and that kind of thing. And I think we really need to do better at seeing that and absorbing that. I think in general, another big one is sustainability for me and the environment. And that's something I think we're all thinking about in terms of climate change and how we live our lives daily, our personal habits, but also the way that industry operates and the way that, it's been so long, it's been all about profit. And I think it's time for that business model to change and for it to be also about people and planet and not just about profits, because we've been, living by one compass for way too long, and it's gotten us into some really weird situations where we have, the 8 richest people on the planet owning as much as 2 billion of the other people, whatever that ridiculously lopsided statistic is. And I had a bit of a taste of this when I worked in the mining industry, and I realized our CEO made $10 million 1 year. 1 year, that was his bonus for 1 year. And here I was on location in South America. I was doing my international assignment, in Peru, and I could see the people who actually lived in the country where we were taking the minerals out of the ground, and they had next to nothing, and he had $10 million, and he obviously just didn't even need it. So there was like another little sort of alarm bell around, I think, wealth distribution that came for me there. So those would be three of the thoughts I have on the changes I would like to see, and I really do my best to align my own actions as well as my leadership and my change work to be in alignment with those changes and supporting others to see and contribute to those changes as well.
Well, I dream of, like, I mean, there's a lot of changes I like to see in the world. I'll just pick one. One of the things that really bothers me is when people aren't technologically literate. And they don't, I'm not necessarily saying everyone should go into STEM fields, but there are so much, like, it blows my mind when I watch like news shows or read the news and I see politicians discussing things such as like climate change or the safety of vaccines, weirdly enough, that's been in the media way too much recently, or if they cause autism and things like that. And then, like, obviously they don't. And if people know how to read scientific papers and do research and filter that stuff out, and if people just had a better understanding of the STEM fields, that this wouldn't be an issue. They shouldn't be debating these things in our government. They're like scientific facts. They're not really opinions. And I think if the world was more technologically literate, then there would be a lot more pressure in the government to just accept fact as fact, and the MPs themselves would be more knowledgeable on the topics they were discussing and making decisions on for our country. So that is one thing I would like to see.
Evidence-based decision making, what a crazy concept. I think we are in a position as Canada to really differentiate ourselves from some other countries that are clearly going in a non-evidence-based direction.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say for now, but I completely agree with you on that. Fantastic. How about you, Jonathan?
Quick anecdote before concerning vaccines. I read somewhere this week that there was a woman was she had a dog, and the vet asked to get a vaccine to her dog, and the woman said no because she didn't want her dog to become autistic, and the vet and all the scientific community just started saying that, well, autism has never been observed in a dog, and we're not sure it even exists for dog, but she still decided not to vaccine her dog because of that. So, you know, facts are hard to believe.
Facts have nothing on people's emotions, man. It's so true. We are not always very rational creatures. So that's something to, yeah, that's definitely a role that we can play as engineers and people who do understand the scientific aspect of things, and also as people who have empathy to understand, like, okay, I see what you're getting at. You're trying to protect your dog. That's totally valid. And here's what the evidence says, and, you know, it's going to be okay, kind of thing. I think that's a really great, that's a great example of a bridge we can build, right?
Another bridge.
Another bridge. Look at that.
So
how about your chain? Yeah.
I'd say that the big, large chain is that I dream about a world that would work for everyone, and that would work for everyone in the future as well. I'm always troubled whenever I read about climate change or some of the consequences of climate change that should be coming in the next 10, the next 50 years. And I always wish that we could find ways to, you know, make the world work for the future generations as well, because like I don't feel too scared for my own life right now, but I'm sad just thinking that 3 generations from now things might be different. So that's what I've been trying to find. That's the dream that's guiding me through exploring engineering at the moment.
That's great, and I think, you know, you both have such nice, rich examples of how you're letting your values lead you. And I think that that's something that it takes, or it has taken a lot of people from previous generations many, many years and decades to figure out how to do.
And it's not that hard, actually.
Well, I think it's something that, you know, for however it happened, your generation is positioned to take it to new lengths, right? The culture and the way that things have worked out, the economy, like all of it is sort of coming together to point you all in this direction. And I think it's great. I think it's really, really cool. And it's exciting to see how the world will develop, given that the rules of the game have shifted, you know, the definitions of success are becoming much more individualized, and that's a good thing. I think it's not just all about those status symbols and big house, big car, you know, big SUV that's going to, you know, spurt greenhouse gases all over the place.
Oh
Like
gosh.
we're rethinking our ideas about what it means to be successful in life. I think that's a great, great thing. So awesome. Okay. About my supports, I will talk about this from my standpoint as an engineer right now. Something that I didn't expect that I've been very excited about is how well embraced I have been, especially recently as a woman in engineering. I'm also a mom. You can hear my little one here. She's also supporting me in her own way. I think I really used to expect, you know, that I would get a lot of pushback and that I would get kind of maybe ridiculed or second guessed as a woman. But it was somewhere around the time that I decided to claim that I can be an engineer and I can be good at my job and nobody can really take that away from me. That was somehow around the time that that negative feedback stopped coming to me, or maybe it's coming and I just don't see it anymore because I'm not open to it. But I've been invited to become chair of my PEO chapter, which is a volunteer position that I'm holding right now and kind of guiding the Grand River chapter of PEO in my own unique sort of way. And I couldn't believe that they, you know, were interested. They put me up for the position and thought I would do a good job. And I've also managed to build a consulting business based on the stuff that I learned in industry. And I get a lot of credibility and a lot of props from men and women that I work with. They value what I bring to the table, and it's I guess easier than some of the literature would indicate that it is for women in STEM. And that's not to say that those barriers don't exist, and it's not to say that, you know, other women, you know, I know they're not making it up when they report different experiences than I have had. But I also really think it's important that women or anyone who's an underrepresented group in engineering understands how possible it is, and that we don't end up turning away good people because they're intimidated by these ideas that there's a systemic bias or there are, you know, problems in engineering or whatever. I would just say, yes, there are problems, and who cares? You can still succeed and kick butt if you want to, I guess, sort of to borrow Sheryl Sandberg's framing, to lean in. I think it's a lot more complex than that, but I think it's so important that people understand that it is possible.
So, I mean, I'm not going to use this layout of the example specifically because it's very specific. But yeah, I agree with Erica. As one of the supports I've gotten, like, there's a big push by a lot of people to increase diversity in engineering, and especially women in engineering. There's a lot of campaigns for it, and even though like it's taking a while to get there, profs are like very encouraging for women to stay in engineering, and there's definitely, we talk about that in our first year classes, for example, and I don't know if that's necessarily something that would have ever been talked about in the past. So, and just like that support system with all the other girls in engineering, because there's still not very many of us, but that is definitely like, we're all automatically friends almost, and like there for each other, which is really cool to have.
Same experience here, Skylar. It's like automatic sisterhood. It's so good. It's the flip side of all those challenges. Great. Okay, how about you, Jonathan?
Awesome. So in terms of support, first example that comes to mind is the support of my parents, because they've always been very they've never pushed a certain vision or a certain job a path to a future job to me. So I've always felt very not capable, but I was able basically to choose whatever I wanted to do, and they've always been there to support me through my choices. And whenever like I have some weird ideas, like getting involved with Engineers Without Borders or taking less classes during a semester to get more involved in other projects, they're always very supportive, and I feel like this support allows me to really like connect my values to engineering and go out of the standard engineering model that 95% of the students go through. And without their support, I couldn't have done that as well. I guess I would have found ways to do it anyways, but they've really helped me go through it.
Beautiful. Sounds like you've got a really solid foundation there.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
use another engineering analogy, you can build anything you want on top of it. That's fantastic. What a gift.
Those analogies, when you start thinking about
I
them, like so much, you can do so much links to engineering with anything.
You know what's funny? I'm not even trying. I don't even know if I can turn it off. It's kind of just part of how I go.
It's part of you. Can't hide it.
Yeah, it really is. So my offer of advice, and I think this is pretty consistent with everything we've been talking about previously, and I think this advice is especially valuable for women, although it certainly applies to young men as well, who are seeing themselves through other people's eyes and are used to kind of following the direction of other people, is to never let anyone tell you who you are or where you should be. I think you always need to be stubbornly self-determining. If someone tells you, especially if it's phrased in a negative, like you'll never be able to, or you're not cut out for, or whatever, finish that sentence. It's never good advice at the end of that sentence, right? So to plant your flag and just make sure that nobody else has the right to define you except you. And if you choose at some point, engineering's not for me, I'm going to go do something else, that's a valid choice, but make it come from you and what you want for yourself, not from someone else's perception of who you are or what you're capable of. I think that's just so important, and it's something that we're not necessarily socialized to do. It's not something we're necessarily taught to do, but it is, I think, something we can learn for ourselves. And my experience of getting this, and believe it or not, I'm in my late 30s, and I think I really only consciously started to process this in the last couple of years. You'll feel it in your stomach. Like, you just know when you are where you're supposed to be, and when you've got to the bottom of something and you're being really honest with yourself, you'll feel it in your body. And that's just the best feeling in the world, when you know that you're in line with who you want to be and being where and doing what you want to do. That is something that's going to change your whole life. It's not like you're going to make one decision and that's it for the rest of your life. I think there are a series of paths that you will navigate and trade-offs that you will make. And, as you go through life, and you're, potentially you will have a family, or you will own property, or you will relocate to another country, like your priorities will shift, and your, the things that you value and the things that you place at the front will shift around, and that's great. And you can get very skilled at optimizing for the things that you need at that time. And again, that comes back to that skill of self-determination and knowing that you're not just going to be one thing or one person or one kind of situation all your life. You're going to be exactly who you decide to be anytime as you go through your life. So don't ever give that away to somebody else.
Yeah, so far, I guess if I was giving advice to, say, a high school student or something, it would be to challenge yourself. Stereotypes are there, and try and break those as much as possible. And yeah, engineering's going to be hard. Any degree is going to be hard. And just challenge yourself to not only like go for things despite the stereotypes, but also challenge yourself to look towards other things too. Like when I was in engineering, I never thought of joining like clubs like Engineers Without Borders or spending so much of my free time focused on international development rather than engineering. But it's definitely challenge yourself to. I was worried going into it, like, oh, I don't know anything about this, but just challenge yourself and don't let the fear of failure hold you back, because that's something I've really challenged in the last year. And it's like the last year, as I've been consciously challenging it, I've probably felt like I've accomplished the most in my life out of all the years. So that's my advice.
Amazing.
Wow,
Great
those are
stuff.
great. Wow, I feel
Yeah,
inspired.
we're on a roll here, man. This is awesome.
Whew.
How about you, John?
I'll grab a beer. Like this is this is for me, I very I very much agree, and I'd like to echo both of your advices. And if I can add something else, I'd say it's to don't like all the choices you make, especially for choosing a university program. They should not be, and you shouldn't see them as final choices, and you shouldn't be stressed because you don't know what to do. I feel like there are so many programs, and life is so full of possibilities and full of time that you have time to try out various options. And it's not it's not a problem if you end up in engineering and you don't like it and you switch programs, or vice versa. Like you can afford to try out things, and you don't have to get it right the first time. I feel like that's something that a lot of people try during high school and stuff like that. You want to find your path, but usually you'll not find it the first time, and it's okay. And it's even nicer because you get all those different experiences that make you really find out what you want to do in the end.
That is fantastic advice. Thank you, John. That's great.
You.
So I think we did the storytelling tips. We did the do's and don'ts. I think what we shared here today, Skylar, Jonathan, thank you so much for jumping in and participating. I think that was a great first cut. I feel like out of what we just laid out here together, we can start to pull the best points. We can start to hone that script. We can start to really pull together something that is going to feel fantastic to deliver to young people in whatever circumstances. We mentioned there's no one spot where this has to be used. It could be in a formal setting, it could be in an informal setting. And we have a specific opportunity that we would like to offer. Do you want to talk about that, Skylar?
Yeah, so it's still very much in its preliminary stages, but we're hoping to do, like on the previously mentioned, we're creating an Engineers of Tomorrow YouTube channel, and we're hoping to get 5 to 10 people by the end of my placement, so like end of August, to have their an engineering story, not necessarily perfected, but like reiterated a few times I worked on, and have people record themselves or be recorded and post the videos of people telling their engineering stories on this YouTube channel.
So if you are interested in that, we would be extremely grateful. We think you'll enjoy the experience, and you'll also be helping Skylar complete her end of summer project and finish her JF placement on a high note. So that would be fantastic. If you're watching this replay and you're interested and it's still August 2017, get in touch with Skylar, please. And she will be sending out a survey to everyone who attended this particular workshop, where you can respond to give us some feedback on today's webinar, and also to indicate your interest potentially in recording a video for us. Again, super duper thank you to both of you for making today's presentation so great. I think this was a really successful first experiment in webinaring and in putting together you know, a Telling Your Engineering course that we may be rolling out and using in many different situations over the next couple of years. So Skylar, I will let you have the last word, but I'm very pleased with how this has gone, and I'd like to thank you both for being on the call, and thanks everyone who is taking the time to watch the replay.
Yeah, once again, just thank you so much for attending, and please respond to the feedback survey. The information we get back from that will be very valuable in helping improve this presentation.